As I was cleaning my workbench to get ready for the next project, I discovered I had left something off the diorama. A German stick grenade. I felt terrible, of course. The video had done so well, and this piece had missed out on all the fun. I needed to make it up to it, somehow. So I modeled it in 1:1 scale in SolidWorks to make the most realistic one I possibly could. Then decided I was going to dedicate an entire diorama to it all on its own. I tried to be as realistic as I possibly could be. I didn't have a real one, obviously, but I looked at reference photos and tried to get it as good as I could right down to the threads. Once the 3D model was complete, I converted them to STL files and printed them on my resin 3D printer. These were certainly some of the largest things I've 3D printed on my Elegoo Mars 2. I wanted to hollow out the main portion so that it wouldn't take up tons of resin, and I usually find that when something is that large, it pulls off the build plate. So I hauled it out, but I need to make sure that the inside was secured with support so that it wouldn't fall apart in the printing process. Once that was done, I checked, made sure everything was fine. Then I saved it to my flash drive. When you hollow out something on a resin 3D printer, you need to put some holes in it so that the suction does not pull the build off the build plate. So I needed to fill those here with some Tamiya epoxy putty. After that, I noticed that the threads needed a little bit of sanding for better clearance. I did actually end up reprinting these because I couldn't get them to fit, so I used a variety of sandpapers. The important thing to remember is safety when you are sanding 3D prints, especially resin 3D prints. Resin dust is absolutely horrible to breathe in, so go outside and wear a respirator when you are sanding any of your 3D prints. Next, it was time to make the handle. We don't actually see a lot of wood on this channel, but from time to time, I do a little bit of woodworking. Once that was done, I wanted to put some markings that I had seen in reference photos onto the handle as well. I did that with some stamps. Probably a little bit large for scale. I know that's weird because it's in realistic scale, but these were probably larger than they were on the actual piece. Sticking with the trend of how real world this could be, I just used regular wood stain to stain the handle. No sense in using oils and expensive paint to just stain a piece of wood. This did come out a little darker than I wanted it to be. I did want the numbers to look really dark, and I wanted it to look dark in certain areas. So I sanded off some of that and then gave it some real world beating up with just handles and things to make it look like it had lived a somewhat beat up life, even though I wouldn't recommend being too aggressive with something this explosive. Some more real world touches, putting some garden soil on there. And then came for the pull cord. The pull cords that I saw in reference photos just looked a little bit more weathered. That may be because they're usually old, so maybe when these were brand new during World War II, the pull cords were not weathered, but I wanted to make mine look a little. Checking over the 3D prints, still a little bit of lines there and things that came out of the print, but I was okay with the quality overall. For all of the silver bits here, where all the threads make contact, I used Rub and Buff, which is a wax-based paint, I guess, and that really helped make everything smooth, so there was no binding. Not that I'm ever going to take it apart again, but if you were going to use this for like a Halloween prop, or you wanted to show in like a classroom setting how these worked, I would definitely recommend using Rub and Buff on all those joints because it looks the part and helps it move more smoothly. I know in real life I've seen that these can be green, but I wanted to make it gray, just because. I don't speak German or read it, but I believe this says something like insert detonator before use. I didn't see it on all reference photos, but I thought it gave it a little bit more of a realistic touch and gave it a little bit more character. I didn't have any good way of printing this out to be as crisp and clean as it would have been in real life, but I really didn't want it to look crisp and clean. I wanted it to look weathered, so I just did it freehand and then used sponges, a few different colors, and then lightly sprayed a real light mixture of white over that, knowing that I was going to weather it further and those crisp, clean lines wouldn't actually work for the look I was going for. But if you were going to do it to look more realistic, the lines would be more crisp and clean. I just used a variety of sponge painting and sponge chips on this since I wanted it to look pretty beat up. Here I have everything laid out how it probably would be in real life. I'm not exactly sure. That's definitely not what I was going for, but I kind of wanted to give you an idea of how these worked since I really didn't have an idea of how they did before I researched them. Again, you have to use super glue when you're using mixed mediums like this. I'm using CA glue here since we're bonding wood to resin. Now I wanted to give this a real-world look and put it on a real-world base. So I just used some cheap styrofoam and we're going to cover it with lots and lots of mud. But I wanted it to look a little sunken in, so I cut out some areas. This is celluclay and water, and that is just garden soil. This worked pretty good. However, I believe the soil must suck up all of the moisture in this because this celluclay usually dries in days and this dried in under a minute. So you can see I had to remove some of the soil from the mixture because it was just becoming rock solid before I could manipulate it. The shell casings are not period correct. They're kind of close, I believe, to some German shells, but that's not really what I'm going for. It's just kind of an art piece, so I just kind of went with things that I had found. And I wanted to give this a look that it was maybe going to be pulled and something happened to the soldier that was about to pull it. So I'm leaving it kind of open to show the inner workings of it and give it a little bit more drama. Here I'm just covering the rest of the base with garden soil because I thought that had a really good texture. Obviously, again, since I'm working in 1:1 scale, I wanted to use things that were in the right scale. So I'm using things that I wouldn't normally use in 1/38 scale. But here, for the edges and for the other mixed areas, I could use some of my regular modeling compounds. And I think this gives it a little bit more of a muddy look. And we're going to make that much more evident later. But I really wanted to make sure this looked like it was maybe in a trench or something. I didn't do much in the way of painting this because I was really happy with the color, but I wanted to blend all of the different colors together. So I did do various coats of browns and things to make everything look more cohesive. So here you can see the cap is going to be modeled off and the string is going to be out. This way, again, it just looks like it gives a little bit more motion and drama to the scene. This is UV resin with a little bit of pigment powder in it. I used this because the styrofoam wasn't completely sealed and I didn't want it to eat away at the styrofoam. So I just did this and then quickly cured it. After that, I used some Woodland Scenics water effects, and I just put that on top of the cured resin. I've been using Future Floor Polish for years. I know you can get it basically almost anywhere. I know in different countries it's not called that, but it has a great smell and it's water-based, so you can kind of put it on anything, and it gives a glossy look. Again, I just dyed it just to use it as almost like a highlight, and again to break up the earth color of the actual dirt. This is supposed to be a footprint. I don't know if it reads like that. I wanted to blend everything in to make it look like it was sunken in the ground, and speckled it just to make it look like it had been sitting there for a little bit of time. So after this, I did a little bit of dry brushing, and that was basically it. I did want to take a minute to talk about these 3D prints because that's becoming a staple of all of my videos, and I've decided to make them available somehow so that if you want to, you can print your own. So that's going to be coming really soon, hopefully by the beginning of next year. And we'll have a way to get these 3D prints to people that want them. Thank you so much for watching.